Welcome to Momma-Sota, the podcast where we dive headfirst into the beautiful mess of motherhood. I'm your host, Monica Eickman, and I'm here to keep it real. In a world that changes by the minute, parenting can often feel like an uphill battle. We all want what's best for our children, but what that best looks like varies for every one of us. Momma-Sota is your passport to the unfiltered, unapologetic world of mommy. No perfectly edited snapshots or unattainable ideals here. We're here to share the ups and downs, the triumphs and tantrums, the mess and the beauty of being a mom. Join me as we explore the raw and authentic side of parenting. This is your safe space to vent, laugh, and learn as we navigate the unpredictable journey of raising strong, capable, and independent children for the future. Hey mamas, welcome to today's episode of Momma-Sota. It's me, your host, Monica Eickman. I'm a stay-at-home mom to 3 children, and they are my absolute world. Although they are the cause of a lot of chaos, too much noise, and an overall crazy go, go, go life, they are also the cause of pure joy, innocence, and laughter too. Joining us today is special guest Tiffany Chesley. She is a California girlie that has been here in Minnesota now for 4 years, raising her babies. Tiffany endured a lot of childhood trauma, from abandonment to abuse. She has used her past experience to turn her journey as a mother into the most healing season of her life thus far. She has found motherhood to be one of the hardest yet most rewarding jobs of her life. Welcome, Tiffany, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so of course we're going to jump into your journey, both past into motherhood and to present here. But before we get into all of that, just tell us more about you and your family as it stands currently.
My family as it is now, my immediate family would be me and my husband and my 3 kiddos. I could never relate more than your introduction because it is a circus half of the time. Our 3rd kid came in as a wild one in 2020, actually. We were pretty much done having kids with the older 2. And so my oldest is 11 and my middle is 9. And then I found out I was pregnant the day after. I had a conversation with my husband telling him, I really think we're not done. And I had to take him to dinner and everything actually to do this because he was very set on nope, 2, that's it. And when we moved to Minnesota, this is where his family's from. And so we were out at dinner and I was like, I've taken a test because I was actually late and it was negative and I felt really sad. And that's why I was like, I'm going to take him to dinner.
Yeah. Okay. So I heard you you took a test and it was negative, but you were sad about it. So okay.
Yes, I took a test. It was negative and I was actually really sad. And so I asked him to go to dinner with me the next day. And at dinner, I was like, I know we've had this conversation and it's been a big, hard no for you, but I would really love the idea if you would be open to one more. And he was like, in this moment, actually, it was the first time in 4 or 5 years where he goes, you know what? Now that we live in Minnesota and we have my family around more, maybe I'd be open to the idea. So we had a really good discussion about it. I was like, okay, perfect. I was like, well, I made an appointment already for my yearly physical. I'm a type 1 diabetic. And so very important for me to be prepared when I get pregnant, especially since we lost our first one. And a lot of it had to do with my diabetes. So I went to the doctor the next day to get my physical. And she came in and said, you're pregnant. And I honestly couldn't believe it. And the funny thing about this is that my personality is very little patience. So there's a lot of irony in that because as soon as my husband got home from work, I said, so I went to the doctor and he's like, yeah. And mind you, this is the very next day after our conversation. I said, I went to the doctor and honey, I'm pregnant. And his face, I don't think I've ever seen it go so pale. And he looked at me and he goes, are you kidding? And I was like, no, but I couldn't even have set this up if I tried, as you know. This isn't yeah. And so what's funny is I took another test and it still showed negative. And he's like, are you sure? And I was like, well, that's what I told the doctor. I was like, no, I can't be. I took a test. And she's like, well, I drew your blood. So there's a little bit of a difference.
A little more accurate testing here.
A lot more accurate. But you know what? This happened in January of 2020. And when we were into that summer, we all know how 2020 went. And I remember my husband looking at me. He's like, it's crazy to think we had talked about waiting a few months and maybe starting in the summer. He's like, it's crazy to think had we done that, I would have probably said no. He would have backed out again because life got so crazy with COVID and everything happening. He's like, I would have been like, nope, we're not going to do it. So I don't know, God had other plans or something because it happened how it happened. And in September, I gave birth to him and he just came out like a wrecking ball. So he is our third wild child to our fun bunch, but it is us five here. And it's definitely fun. Busy.
So, yeah, busy. I was gonna say I've got 3, and busy is a good good word for it.
You think you have motherhood down with my first two? Oh, golden. And then this one came out, and nothing I ever did with my other two worked on him. I was like, wow, I am like relearning all over again. Like, holy cow. It was
It's
crazy.
it's everything. I was like, yeah, like you said, and even when you have it something down with that child, you're like, okay, I finally got their nap time routine down, and all of a sudden you're like, nope, that doesn't work anymore.
Yep, exactly. He just loves to challenge us. So, yeah,
Yeah, I've
that's our
seen too that.
family dynamic.
Yeah. So let's go back then. As much as you're wanting and willing, just kind of take us through some of your childhood and upbringing, and how it's kind of shaped you.
So I'll give you a good analogy. My husband, when I met him dating, said, when I explained to him my family, kind of in a snapshot, he's like, wow, you're like one of those soda machines at Five Guys. There's like 150 different flavors. And it was so true. And it made me laugh so hard because I'm like, it is so valid the way that he said that. I was born up in Northern California. My biological mom is Barb, and my biological father, we'll just say biological father, they were married and they divorced. I probably wasn't even one. I had it been a few months or maybe before I was even, I don't remember the exact age, but I know I was young. And my mom ended up remarrying my stepdad, who to me is like my dad. So if I ever refer to dad, that's probably who I'm talking about. She married him when I was about one and a half. And my biological dad stopped seeing me around five. At five, then it was just me and my mom and my dad. So stepdad, but dad. They had a little boy, my brother Michael. So now you can see we have one set of common parents. My biological dad, though, had my brother Josh with a different woman. And then he later went on to another marriage and had another daughter. So we all have different parents, but someone in the same relation somehow. It's fun. And then with that have become step parents and stuff along the way. So my mom and my stepdad did divorce, and he remarried my stepmom, who had a son, Cody, already from a prior marriage. And then my dad also had my sister Jessica when I met him, or when we met them. So she's my older sister. I hate to say step because I feel like for my siblings, they're always going to be just who they are to me, my family.
Yeah.
But in a way, all of us are somehow half or just step. And that kind of was like, I don't know if that sets everything up, but I think it's an interesting thing when I look at that compared to my husband, who's the baby of five kids, same mom, same dad, grew up in the same house. I mean, just totally different, right?
Yep.
Uh, when I was five, like I said, Roger, my biological father, abandoned me and decided that it wasn't worth the effort to come down and get me. So he stopped showing up. My mom, unfortunately, it's an interesting thing that she was like my best friend at this age, actually, all the way up till about 11. And when I say best friend, I mean my mom and I did everything together. She made sure Christmases were really big, birthdays were a big deal. She used to coach my soccer. I showed horses. My dad would show up and be cameraman Mike, and it was a really great, I mean, it was great years of my life. I loved it. I have very fond memories there. Something just shifted, and I think there's a part of me that might not ever quite know what shifted in my mom, but around 10, I know that she started to drink a little bit more, and she was definitely hanging out with the wrong people. And that put a divide between her and my dad, and she just made really, really poor choices that ended up completely breaking up our family. However, those choices then came with even bigger consequences. So I ended up living from 10 to 11 were some tough years. And then I ended up at my grandma's house because my mom had tried to kill herself. And I was at my grandma's visiting. And so I ended up enrolling in school there out in Arizona. And then my mom started dating guys from prison. And she called me one day and said, I'm moving you to Blythe, California. I started dating this guy, and you need to be out here with me. And I ugh, I was bawling and I said, no, please, no. At this whole time, my dad is still in my life. Like I said, I don't like to say stepdad, but my stepdad to me, but he's still in my life. He is doing things behind the scenes that I'll never be able to say thank you enough to him. He was sending my grandma money without me knowing. I learned this later just to make sure I was being helped, taken care of. He's just he was an honorable man at for what he didn't have to do. And I remember calling him crying and I'm like, I don't want to go live with her. Well, here shows up Roger, who came out of nowhere. And I'm 13 now at this age. My mom gets a hold of Roger somehow. Roger shows up at my grandma's house and I'm now meeting him again. Last time I saw him was 5, so I don't really know him. And he's like, yeah, you can come live with me. I live in Nebraska. Here's my wife. Like, it was just a whole, like, what? And I called my dad bawling, and my dad said, I'll do what I can. And my dad went to the courts and he filed for custody of me. And the lawyer that represented him actually said, it's pretty unheard of for a stepdad who's now divorced from that mom to be able to get custody from her. Like, that doesn't happen. So she said she had to meet both my biological dad and my mom in person. And she got out of the meeting with both of them and told my dad, there's no way in hell she's going to live with them. I will fight as much as I can. And she did. And she won. And my dad got custody of me at 14. And I was able to go move in with him and my stepmom back to California where I'm from, and do my high school years there. And throughout this time though, from 10, when my mom started dating guys in prison, just being in really bad areas, all the way up till 5 years ago. I mean, our journey was, so when she would drink, she was very abusive with me, which is where I think it's important to note, like, how she was my best friend prior. This is a woman that, I mean, I would follow everywhere. We just did everything, to then would drink and just became so mean and physically would hurt me and put me in situations with these other people that I shouldn't have been at that age. And during my high school years, she moved out to California and she did her best to try, but she was still dating the wrong kind of guys. And, she'd go into treatment centers and come out and still not be able to get sober. And over the years of my 20s, she was homeless. And I finally just kind of lost contact with her because I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't constantly try to keep in contact with someone that wasn't willing to help themselves. And so I went through a lot of my 20s and honestly most of my 30s, because it wasn't until 5 years ago, really, that she got sober without her. And there's a lot that happened in those years. And so that's where it's interesting, because to have someone and to have known what it felt like to have a mom that could have been so amazing and to have lost it, I don't know if that hurts more. And I can't compare myself to anyone else's story, so I don't want to. But I do know it feels sometimes, I remember just feeling very sad because it almost made me angrier that I was mourning the loss of someone that wasn't gone, and that person was so easily able to abandon somebody that I know how much my mom loved me. That's the craziest part. Like, this woman would, I don't even know how to describe it. That woman would give her life for me in a heartbeat. And yet alcohol had that much of a control on her, and the alcohol that then turned into drugs and men and all these things that it turned into was able to take that person away, like that love that you feel like is so unbreakable. And it's about 5 years ago that my mom finally got sober, and her and I reconnected. And it's been a journny. Definitely, I was already working on my healing because I had started once I had my daughter, but it's been an even more interesting obstacle to find myself in now, is healing this part of, like, I know it's cliche and I've seen it everywhere, but God, it's so valid. I'm now healing the little me, where when I had my daughter, I was healing, I think, something else for her. And lately, these past few years has been about healing little Tiffany and being the one to go back and save her. Like, the mom I am to my kids is who I'm trying to be to that little girl. And that's a really, I don't know, it's just such an interesting thing and motion to go through. And I do this, well, I do it daily, obviously, with work that I do, but I do consistent therapy. And it is mind blowing how helpful it has been, though, to my life and where
It's
I'm
a
at.
hundred percent valid, and don't let anyone tell you different or ever stop validating yourself in that regards. much lesser degree, but even your story there with your mom brought up memories of my own. I used to call my mom, same thing. We were so close, and I had 4 sisters, and we were all close. But I called my mom every day in like during high school. One of my classes had a phone booth in it, and I would call my mom in class, talk with her on the phone every day, and then in college, things got rocky with her and my dad, and they split. And you don't think after like 25 years, you kind of think your parents have made it. And
Hmm.
so for them, they went through divorce, and that changed a lot too. And my mom moved to Florida at the same time. And so there was just a part that, like you said, just was lost. And on my end, a much smaller scale, but being able to, and I think the same thing was like the not being able to understand why, because you knew that love was there. So don't
Yeah.
ever, yeah, not validate your feelings on that.
Yeah. It's definitely an interesting, and I think what opened my eyes is the love. So I remember the exact moment that I realized, oh my gosh, I am hurting so much more than I ever thought. I always have thought I'm a strong person. Like, I went through my 20s just doing what I did, and I always remember saying I would never become a statistic like my mom. And so I was very, very headstrong on making sure like I did that. If I drank in my 20s, I was not going to drink to excess. Like, did I have any issues? Never. Like, I didn't have those addiction issues like my mom did, and I'm thankful for that. And I also made sure though that I was always just very, very responsible in that way. I've worked 2 jobs since I was 16 because I'm like, okay, I got diabetes at 14 actually, and my dad is the one who always taught me, you got to learn to not depend on anyone. And it was that reminded me, okay, I'm going to work 2 jobs because this is the only way that I'm going to be able to afford to live and pay for my medicine and pay for insulin and pay for life. And I did that through so many of those years. So when I had my daughter, it was like a light bulb went off. And I remember I was home with her. I just got home from the hospital. She cried for 8 hours straight. I couldn't get her to stop. My husband
Mm.
couldn't get her to stop. I am just exhausted, but I'm like, okay. Finally, she falls asleep, and I'm holding her, and my in laws came in. And I remember my husband saying, hey, honey, do you want to let my mom hold her so you can get some rest? And I said, okay. And mind you, I hadn't put her down at this point. Like, between me and him helping her, like holding her and getting her to calm, I was like, I've got this. And I remember handing her to my mother-in-law, and that's when the light switch went off. And I looked at her, and I looked at my husband, and I ran in the room, and I lost it. And I'm bawling. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this has to be because I didn't have sleep, because postpartum, like all
Yeah,
of the things are
blaming the
there.
emotion. Yeah.
Yeah, all of that's there in like an outside point of view. A doctor would be like, yeah, that makes sense. But no, this was like an inside moment of, I remember Trent came in and he goes, honey, what's wrong? And I said, how could she have just abandoned me? Those were my exact words. And he's like, who? Like, he didn't even like know at the moment, what is she talking about?
Right.
And I said, Trenton, look at that little girl. I will never, ever, ever abandon her. And I am bawling while I'm saying this, though, like a wallow that you can only describe if you know what I mean. It just hurt. And that's the moment. That is the exact moment that I went, oh my God, I am so sad and so angry that that person loved me this much. Because now I know that motherly
That
love,
mother's love.
and
Yep.
was able to leave. Like, what? And yep, that was in 2013. And that was the day I can say my, like, I need to go to therapy. I've got to figure out what's going on with me. All of it started. That healing journey started then, that moment.
So your story highlights your your commitment to breaking those cycles and ensuring that your children have a positive upbringing. What what's some specific like practices and routines have you implemented to create that nurturing environment for your kids and to break that cycle?
My biggest thing that I make sure my kids always know is that they can come and talk to me about anything, and that their emotions matter, their feelings matter, that life is hard, even at their age. And I hear it and I get it, and I'm here to listen.
and I'm also here to guide. And the number one thing I always tell them, and they know if I say, what's my job? They'll say to keep us safe. I'm like, to keep you safe. But it's to keep you safe in more ways than one, right? Like I can't protect them for the rest of their lives from what the outside world is. Keeping them safe is just knowing that they always have mom to call, or their own emotions and resilience to stand on. And it's interesting because as they've been growing, I learn it in different stages with them. And I know, like, my son at 3, that might look like, he wants to have a meltdown because I put the spoon inside of the yogurt. This is an honest meltdown that he has often. And I have to say, I hear you. You're frustrated that I put the spoon in there. I'm going to set this on the table. You can eat it now. Or if you'd like to go, if you want to let it out and then eat it when you're done, you let me know. And he will look at me sometimes and he'll be so mad and he will just start screaming. And I think in those moments, there's a fine line, because there's a fine line of allowing your child to feel their emotions and also be disrespectful, and that is something that was very hard for me to learn at first, but I've kind he's my challenger, right? But I've got it down better now, thanks to him, because my daughter reacted in ways of like, oh well, I'm okay now, I'm better, like everything that I would word and phrase worked with her in a way. It was easy. With my middle one, a little bit more pushback, but similar. And with Leighton, even when I say that, he might take that yogurt and throw it across the room. And believe me, when you want to talk about the self-control we have to have as mothers, because we're already pushed to the point of exhaustion or mental load, exhaustion is where I say my biggest point of having self-care comes in, where me going to therapy and learning how to control my emotions first are so important, because I'm able to not only then talk to my kids about it, but practice it and show them. And I will say, in that moment, in fact, this just happened probably about a week ago, he threw that yogurt. And I was really frustrated because here's another mess. And I think it was after a few meltdowns. And I looked at him and I said, I think we both need a break, because I'm getting really upset too. And I walked him to his room and I said, you sit on your bed. I'm going to go sit on my bed and I'm going to take some deep breaths. If you need to yell on your pillow, yell on your pillow. I might do the same. And I did. I walked in here and I kept the door open. This isn't like a yelling match. It's not, abandoning him. It was literally, we both need a timeout. And I came in here and I said, when you're ready, you can come get me. Or if I'm ready first, I'll come get you, leaving it open. And he comes walking in. And I think we sat a good 5 to 10 minutes, it felt like, because I just sat in here, was taking my deep breaths. And he came walking in and he came right next to me and he crawled up on the bed and on my lap and he said, I'm sorry, mommy, I threw the yogurt. And I said, I'm sorry, I was getting really frustrated too, because I did get frustrated. You could see it. And I said, sometimes, and we had a conversation, and I'm talking about a 3-year-old. And that for me is my point. Right there in that moment, my kids matter. His feelings matter. What he did wasn't right, and we walked right downstairs and he cleaned it up and he grabbed a towel and wiped it down and he grabbed the spray, like all of what he realized, hey, when I do that I have to clean it up and that wasn't right. He learned all that. It wasn't giving him something, it wasn't shaming him for that moment, it was teaching him that his emotions right there, this is a way that we can handle them. And those have been my absolute number one rule for myself, and really honestly teaching my husband it when it comes to all my kids, that they're going to make mistakes. They're going to spill. They're going to do all of these things, and they get bigger as they grow up. But I'm always going to be here to walk with them and talk to them. And if there's consequences, they're going to have to handle, those consequences will come with decisions. But that mom will always be here. I'm never going to leave. And I know that's a anthem for me, considering, both of my parents at some point just left. So that's probably my biggest thing that I will say I know I practice day in, day out with them, that I think really opens up so much more, though, in the parenting. Like, so much more amazing things come from that.
I want to commend you, and that's an incredible parenting moment all around. And there's so many pieces that I want to pull out from there and just highlight. First, I got goosebumps when you said it, because it is like the exact same thing I say to my children. And whenever like I'm giving them an instruction that they don't really like, and I say to them, I say, what is mommy's job? and they
Yep.
say to keep me safe. and
Oh, yes, I
and
love it.
and I think, like you said, depending on the age of your child, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
it, especially in the beginning, feels like you're just talking about that physical safety. Why did I tell you you
Mm-hmm.
have to stop and look across the road? Why?
Yep.
But beyond that, like you said, I'm preparing your emotional safety and creating all of those boundaries and things for you. So that was kind of that first piece. But even just moving into your specific scenario with the yogurt, I like that you said there is a fine line between your child expressing their emotions and being disrespectful. And I think because we forget they're so young and they don't know,
Mm-hmm.
the difference, and they are expressing themselves the best that they can or trying to describe what they're feeling, but they don't
Mm-hmm.
have that vocabulary. They don't have that maturity.
Exactly.
And then just even I know one of the big sticking points or points of contention on Facebook or other social media platforms is like the gentle parenting
Mm-hmm.
phrase and then lack of discipline. And one thing I saw recently that I thought was important is there's a difference between discipline and punishment.
Yes.
And so just recognizing in your story here, like he had to clean it up. That was, part of
Mm-hmm.
the consequence. And then recognizing too, like you needed a break and letting your child know, like that brings it down to that same level with them that
Yep.
mom's not perfect, you're not perfect. We both need breaks versus just always telling your kid, like, calm down, take breaths.
Yes. And you know what? I remember gentle parenting is exactly what I remember reading with my daughter and going, okay. And in fact, Janet Lansbury is one of my absolute favorite people that I learned so much from when I had her and read her blogs and things like that. And one of the things that she said that always stuck out to me, and I use it often, when they do something that is truly like, my son might want to take his hand and hit. I will not let you do that. I'm going to be firm. I will not let you do that. And I'm going to keep it simple. But I remember the one thing she said is, for example, say that you want them to get their pajamas on. And I've used this often with my son is, I can say, I need you to get your pajamas on. And he'll tell me, no, I don't want to go to bed. So my response can be, well, let me think of my childhood. Get your pajamas on right now. Get your bleep up there. I can think of all the things that I was told. And, it was just kind of basically like, you're going to do what I say.
Mm-hmm.
Or what I love is her approach, which is the approach that I try to take. You can walk up there and get your pajamas, or I'm going to pick you up and take you in there and put on your pajamas. The point is, I'm giving him a choice and I'm giving him an option. The end result, though, is the same. He's going to get his pajamas on. And I love that concept, and I use it with all of my kids often because it's that for me is the point that I think people miss in gentle parenting, or maybe they don't miss it and they just don't like it. And that's totally fine. Like, I am not here to tell anybody how to raise their kids. But with me, I feel like with gentle parenting, it has given them still this choice of autonomy without taking that from them. And I will say, out of all three of my kids, I will say I've gotten better at it, and my third is the most independent. He is so confident in himself that I'm like, okay, I mean, we learn with each kid, but I'm like, wow, I've really gotten good at this with him, even though he's the one that challenged me the most, because I can see how he is. He is so brave and just very like confident in what he's going to do. And we go to that playground, and you know what? He's going to climb the highest one, and I'm not going to be over there like, get down, get down. I don't want you to hurt yourself, because he does what he knows his body is capable. And all of those things, like, he has actually taught me so much in remembering, like, okay, this is why I trust this process. And I love that I look at him and go, okay, it's that funny saying what they say, like, they're a lot right now. Let me just get through these years and then go be a lot to the world because I know you're going to do amazing
Mm-hmm.
things. That is exactly who Leighton is, my little guy. My older two are too, but I can tell, I definitely can see at what stage I was at in my parenting with each one. It's interesting. With my daughter, she has a lot more anxiety. And
we moved a lot when she was born, and I know that I actually was getting anxiety during these years. So it's interesting to see this and kind of go, okay, I'm curious how much that reflects in that moment, right? And with my middle one, the same. And I don't know, just it's so fun to see all three of them. But this gentle parenting for me has worked so well and still created boundaries. And believe me, I'm going to be so honest right here. I was just at the doctor's about a month ago with Leighton, and I looked at Dr. Bob and I said, I don't know what else to do. I love him so much, but he is wearing me out. I think I'm screwing up. I'm doing something like, oh my gosh, he's broken two TVs. He's done. I mean, I just told him the list of everything. And he looks at me and he goes, he sounds like a 3-year-old, first off. You got to be on top of him. Whereas my other two might have gotten a little bit more of a, space in between. And sure enough, I took his little advice and practices and I like brought him home. I'm like, okay, he is like that worked. So I think it's great to also know that sometimes it's not going to work for your kids, but to, reach out, and it's okay to say this isn't working and what do I need to do? And I was very upfront though. I'm like, what advice do you have? And that was like nice to hear him because he has different points of views, but he respected that those were my boundaries and was able to give me advice that helped us.
I think it's so important for people to realize this is kind of what I go back to a lot in different aspects on Mommasota, but being able to be open and vulnerable and share the ugly side of motherhood or our parenting or our homes and messes, whatever that might be, is we see like I said, this picture perfectness online. And so much of that is curated. And if we truly want help, if that's all we're displaying to our friends and our family and our doctors,
Mm-hmm.
then there's no help to be offered because they look at you and say, well, everything's hunky dory and beautiful.
Yes, it's so isolating though in that realm. I couldn't
It
imagine.
is. It is, and I've seen it.
Mhm.
I've seen it in people that I care dearly about, and I know them for real, and I see though what they're doing with like I said, with social media or whatever it is, and then you ask them, how are you doing or what makes you happy, just like a simple question, and they completely break down, and you're like, wait a minute,
Mhm.
you're giving off this everything's amazing vibe. What is going on here?
Yes, social media. I swear it's an interesting one out there.
So going back to then also, you moved a lot in childhood. It sounds like even a lot in your adulthood here with, like you said, with your second. And now from California to Minnesota, it's been a solid 4 years. Is that right?
Yes. So actually, when I met my husband we got married in 2002. Oh shoot, 2011. It's going to be 13 years. 2011. We got married in 2011 in California. So he's from Minnesota. He moved out to California and met me. We got married and we moved to Pittsburgh with his job. So his job would promote, and as he would promote, we would move. So we went to Pittsburgh, and that's when I had my daughter. From Pittsburgh, we actually moved to Maryland. That's where I had my second son. From Maryland, we went to Florida and didn't have any kids there because that was, remember, the no baby talk.
Yeah.
I think we picked up a cat, and then from there we moved to Minnesota into 2019, and yeah, so that's when we moved here to Minnesota. So we had quite a few different moves that took us around and away from anybody, which did not help when you become a parent. That was not fun, but definitely had a lot of moving in between that.
So that obviously all of the movement is gonna, affect you personally, impact you as a mother. What adjustments did you make through any of these different moves um, to help in your transition?
I'd have to say I have to go back to therapy because remember when I had my daughter is when that sparked. And I am a very, very social person. I am an extrovert. I love people. And growing up in California, all my friends are there and I just knew so many. And I never thought it would be hard for me to move. I'm like, nope, I'll go and I'll make new friends and I'll be good. Then comes motherhood, and holy cow, here I am, a new mom with no mom of my own to be like, hey, you want to come help? No friends because I just moved to this place and now I'm an adult trying to make friends. So finding part-time jobs was a big one at first, just to get out of the house. I met a few people, but you start to really realize like, oh, like it's a different world out here. And through therapy, that was helping me though heal. I think the part of me that was also keeping me from meeting these new people, because I started to become anxious, realizing, well, with my husband's job, we're going to be moving again. So why do I want to get close to anyone? Like that kind of went through my mind. However, I was home day in and day out, realizing this is very isolating. It's just me and my daughter. And being such an extrovert, I'd miss my friends and then I'd be calling them and wishing they'd come see me. And it was some rough few years. I would say it wasn't until I got to Florida, to be very honest, that I definitely had some really, really tough times. It really took a toll on me and my husband's relationship, because he kind of had this guilt, like he's at work 12 hours a day and having to come home and see his wife really sad. And that was really tough for him. And when I got to Florida, I had already started a business actually. I started a handmade clothing company, and I started that when I got to Florida, and I started going to the gym and meeting people. I was able to actually get people to come help and work with me. And so that was like started kind of my inner circle of just friends down there. And they were amazing. They still are. I love that I can still talk to them. And from there, though, just finding that opportunity to get out of the house between the gym or, taking my kids to any play dates and things like that. I'll be honest, I've done a few, and I probably am that play date dropout just because I'm also really bad at remembering to like, oh, it's what day? Oh, that was Thursday. Got it. Like I am that mom. I'm not very organized in that way. So I would do play dates, but I found a lot of more of my people and friends through the relationships I found, and then their kids would kind of be around and kind of created those, relationships that way was the best way for me to do it and not be so frustrated at my husband for being gone all day.
I think sometimes too, I mean, I stay home, so same thing. I try to find those different groups and things and whatever, but I'm kind of a homebody also. But I find
Mhm.
myself in the groups. I I showed up alone, but I feel like so many moms showed up like with a plus one kind of deal, like their other girlfriend.
Yes, I do agree with that. Or they already have connections where you're like, hi, I'm the new girl.
Yep. And
Yeah, it's just weird. I know it is weird.
so balancing just like your home right now still.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
I work from home now. I should say that. So
Okay.
yes, I work from home, but I do homeschool my older two now and work from home, and then have my youngest. He goes to an amazing preschool and he's learning all the things.
Balancing then working from home, homeschooling, still drop off pickup of the other, and being a wife in general. Self-care is still something that you've is important for you. How are you balancing or finding time and space for your self-care and healing journey?
So, a couple of things. One, I absolutely have to get workouts in. I go to Burn Boot Camp and I do 45 minutes. It's the workout. They have child watch too, which I love. So if I have to bring the kids, at least they're going in there and they're able to, hang out while I get my workout in. But that has been so amazing for my mental health. But my therapy, I still do therapy weekly. And one of her suggestions that she gave me, I've implemented on a daily, is I actually swing in my hammock for 15 minutes a day. And if it's not in the hammock because it's wintertime, I'll sit on my rocking chair. But there's a known, and I'm so sorry if anyone knows about science stuff, I'm going to probably mess this up when I say it, but there's a known like thing to it where when you're making that rocking motion, it calms your brain down. I do have ADHD, well, ADD. And so I find myself actually more overstimulated than anything when I'm with the kids and have all these things. And then my older two have ADD. So I'm also trying to help them with theirs. And that one simple practice, 15 minutes a day, is like a must do along with the workout, because it allows my brain to calm down. And it is a physical reaction that I get. I sit in that hammock and I will either listen to just the noise of outside, or I'll put in my headphones and just swing for 15 minutes. And it's a game changer. I wish she would have told me about it years ago, but I've been doing that now for probably the past 2 years, and I love it, especially in summertime. And then, like I said, though, if it's in the winter, I'll still sit in the chair and I just do the same thing. And my kids know, and I've taught them the same thing. That's a really big one for self-care, taking care of myself, at the gym and things. I am not this kind of girl that loves to work out, by the way. I like to go because I enjoy it, but I am not like hungry for it. I go because it feels good, and I want to make sure that I'm healthy and I'm giving my kids a really good example of taking care of our bodies and what that means. But it is something that sometimes I'm like, okay, you got to go. You got to go. Like, I got to talk myself into this. I can do
Yeah.
this. I never regret it after, but it is
It's always
natural.
after is good.
Yes, but it is not a comes natural. I'm up at 5 a.m. kind of girl. That is not me. But those are my two biggest ones. I wish I could say I journal all the time and do all that, but I am really bad at that, to be honest with you. But myself, yeah, those are the two biggest ones that are my self-care that I'm like, okay, I do enjoy doing those and they really help me for my day.
I think that's the important piece of it too. And I've had this conversation with several moms on here and elsewhere is whatever that self-care is for you, that's all that
Mm-hmm.
matters.
Yep. Exactly. And I've had my therapist suggest many, believe me, and I'll come back next week. I'm like, that didn't work. She's like, okay, let's try something
Next.
else. Next. But so she's given me many ideas. And I think, like you said, self-care comes in so many ways. I mean, I have a good friend who said she showers sometimes 2, 3 times a day. She's like, I need to, and I like it. And I feel like it's like a privilege, and I have to. And that's her self-care. And I'm like, okay, like it's amazing to hear the way other people, what they do that gives them that feeling of like, oh, okay, that feels good. But definitely my therapy too. I've got to make that as my third one. I don't know. I love it. I love learning each week. I love learning. She's there sometimes just even when I need her in a pinch. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing happened with my daughter. What do I do? Like, it's like having a friend that you really can just unload on. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Sometimes you have to sit here. And she's like, heck, that's what I'm for. You just can unload on and it just feels good. So talking about it obviously is important.
I love that you're talking too just so openly about therapy and like you say it with such pride in your voice, which is amazing because there's always this stigma of, people are talking, everything's going, and then they kind of mumble across therapy and then they keep going. And
Oh no, my therapy, I'll be honest, I've actually had probably 4 or 5 friends I referred her to. And then I started laughing because I was like, if they start taking my appointments, like I get seniority, like I love her. And I've had multiple therapists actually, like I said, since 2013. And they play such an important role and I really hope mental health, I think the stigma is really starting to shift. And I think this all circles back to what I said in the beginning. Even my goal is literally to raise emotionally healthy kids and to teach them that your emotions matter. My son will cry. I love it. I want him to cry. I do not want a man who thinks he can't. And this has all started to impact even my husband. And God, the growth that we've had in our marriage, and I love it for him. I love seeing that he goes to therapy. And it wasn't like an easy thing for him to start doing, but he started to do it and realized, like, hey, I'm actually, like, he would come and talk to me and we'd be talking about stuff. He's like, well, I learned like this, inner critic inside of me. And I'm like, hold on, what? Like, I love this. Like, we are able to actually have communication that is in such a different level of our emotions because we're realizing where it's stemming from. And we're both having to work on things, right? We did not learn when we were young. He did not have a family that talks about emotions, and that's okay. That's what they did. Like, this isn't shaming any of who our parents and all them were. We can only do what we know that we want different. And I'm sure my kids are going to grow up and go, I want this different than my mom did. And that's okay. As long as it's growth, it's growth. And therapy is a very open thing in our house. I mean, my kids have both had a therapist at one point when they were really struggling. And I'm like, I don't know that I can have the tools to help you with all this. Like, let's find a therapist that you can really confide in. And my daughter, she had a therapist for a year that she loved and it helped her a lot. And she still would come and talk to me about what they talked about on her own. And I loved that because that showed me more. Again, my daughter knows she can come to me. What she tells me is safe, but she also had that just in case, that person as an outlet if she didn't feel like she could. So therapy is, yeah, I couldn't praise it enough. I call myself an unlicensed therapist to my friends and we joke about it, but I'm like,
Well, and
I'm
I was going
here.
to say at the end, but you said it all on your own. So I'm so glad that you realize that and see that is you've created that safe space for your daughter that you can accept and know that you can't provide necessarily all the tools because that's not your profession, but that
Mm-hmm.
then she's still willing to come and talk to you about whatever it is because you are that safe space for her.
Yep. Yeah. Very important.
So, looking back then just on your journey overall, what are some of the key lessons you've learned about self-care and personal growth um, to just kind of pass on to our listeners?
I think the biggest thing, this is actually the part that probably makes me emotional, is just be gentle to yourself. You know, I can only speak from knowing that I have a lot of past trauma that has really affected me. And so the one thing I just have to keep reminding myself is the way that I talk to my daughter, I need to talk to myself that way. And self-care isn't always, I take a shower and I get ready each day. The self-care is sometimes just saying, hey, to myself, you're having a really tough day and it's okay. It's been a rough morning. And finding some way to fill and flip that day to fill up your cup is so important. I have had many days where I'm like, I am overstimulated to the max. My kids are going crazy. I just want to cry. I feel like calling my husband and saying, I can't do this. And then I will literally look at my kids and think, what would I tell my daughter right now? And I say, what do I need? And I have had times where I'm like, guys, let's go. We're going to get in the car. We're going to go. I don't even care. Like, I'll pick Target. We're just going to go to Target. We're going to get in the car and I will bring them to Target. And all of a sudden I'm walking around and I'm like, what would you do if you wore this? Or one of my favorite activities to do with my older two with them is I'll go to Target and say, okay, pick out an outfit for me. And I get to pick out one for you. And we will go in the dressing rooms and try on clothes that each other picked out. And what happens is that I find myself laughing and I find myself smiling. And these little people that I love so much who were driving me absolutely crazy a minute ago, they're also the same ones that fill me up and allow me to go back to that inner child and ask little Tiffany, what would she have done then? I would have loved if my mom said, honey, let's go have some fun. And that, for me, that self-care and that reminder just to be gentle with yourself on those days and fill up your cup the way you would your kids, it's so important. And it's a game changer. And it doesn't always have to be with your kids, mind you. I've definitely had times where I'm like, bye, mom's going to Starbucks by herself. But, I find my cup gets filled with play and with laughter. And so it's whatever, and coffee, but it's whatever it takes is what helps me get out of those and really help me shift that mind and be kind to myself.
Yeah, Tiffany, I don't think I could have wrapped it up or come full circle better myself. It speaks directly to the sentiment at the beginning of me saying, my kids are my noise, my kids are my crazy, they're my chaos, they're my, all of that. But like you said, they're also my joy and my laughter and my fun and just remembering that when we're in the midst of the chaotic side of things.
Yeah, 100%.
And so that kind of, yeah.
That
Right?
make me cry.
Yeah. So I think with that, I mean, that again, be gentle with yourself. That echoes the sentiment. My favorite line to leave everybody with is, until next time, mamas, keep doing your best. Thank you for joining me on this roller coaster of momming right here on Momma-Sota. I hope you enjoyed our candid conversation about all things parenting, where perfection is left at the door and real life takes center stage. Stay tuned for more heartfelt, unfiltered discussions in the next episode. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review Momma-Sota on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to us. Until next time, this is Monica Eickman signing off. Keep rocking that mom life, and remember, you've got this.